Hello, everybody, and welcome to Project HR, a podcast dedicated to building better workplaces. Project HR is brought to you by IRI Consultants. IRI empowers leaders to prevent and solve mission-critical workforce issues through holistic and sustainable strategies. For more information, you can visit IRI at iriconsultants.com. I am Jennifer Oraquad, Director of Business Development for IRI, and your host for this episode of Project HR. Now, employee safety is always top of mind for HR professionals, but for those working in manufacturing, it's even more critical. Protecting workers from the physical dangers of processes and machines and making sure they return home in the same condition in which they arrived is the number one priority for anyone working in manufacturing. Here to spell out this challenge and help us achieve our goals is Brad Kramer, owner and principal consultant for Provenio Consulting. Brad, thank you so much for joining me today on Project HR.
Hello, Jennifer, and thank you for having me.
So, Brad, first, I'd really love to know a little bit about your background and how occupational health and safety have come to be your points of expertise.
You bet. My background was principally in my 20s doing a lot of blue collar work. I was a CNC machinist, dog sled guide, worked in construction, did some maintenance in factories and things like that, and also started out as a volunteer firefighter. So I did a lot of the hands on types of jobs and roles that I help coach people on today. But I was also that guy that got injured a lot,
Hmm.
getting ergonomic injuries, back injuries, needed stitches for work related injuries more than once. So that really led to me wanting to help businesses empower their new employees rather than putting them in danger.
So, in this episode, we want to talk a little bit about safety specifically. And the reason we're focusing on manufacturing is that safety can be a lot more challenging in manufacturing versus other industries. Is that fair to say?
I would say that safety is more challenging because there's more hazards. But there's more hazards even in, say, a construction industry where you might be coming to a different work site every day because the site has been built up on. So in manufacturing, you might have more routine hazards, but every industry has its own challenges. So even when you look at, say, office settings where people might be doing more computer work and things like that, they have carpal tunnel, ergonomic injuries, and things like that. So yes, manufacturing has its own set of hazards, but it's not
Hmm.
unique.
And I'm sure the requirements for compliance in a manufacturing environment are also more difficult than other industries. Is that true?
In a sense, it can be, but we're under the same regulations as, say, retail stores or just about any other industry except for construction and maritime are the primary ones. But we're all under the same regulations. So it does have its own unique challenges,
Hmm.
but also the same set of regulations.
So, beyond the obvious benefits of keeping workers healthy and safe, there are other benefits to maintaining a safe working environment as well.
Absolutely. So if you want to communicate to your employees that you don't care about their safety, that you don't care about them as people, put them in an environment where you don't give them the safe work practices, the training, and things like that. That's a sure recipe to drive your good employees away from your business. So by practicing safety, you're giving them the message that I care about you, that you're more important than the product that we put out, and your employees are your greatest asset to your business. It's also about risk management because every risk has a cost. Employee turnover. When you're working with employees that they're leaving because they don't feel safe and protected and cared about by their employer, that turnover, as you know, in HR, definitely has a cost.
Mm.
It impacts the consistency in the business of your final product, productivity, and everything along the way. So the ROI on safety projects is often 3 to 5 times higher than other comparable projects for many reasons. So it adds many benefits to your business to have a robust safety program beyond just keeping them safe and compliant.
Interesting. And I would think it would also positively impact recruitment, this intentionality around safety, especially important considering the challenges that our HR audience faces today with talent acquisition.
Absolutely, that as well. Safety is a core pillar to build marketing around for your recruitment. So, if you recall Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if somebody's going to be productive and engaged, they have to feel safe first. If if they're walking around worried about where's their basic needs in life going to come from, do they have to worry about all these hazards around them that they don't know how to protect themselves from, they're not going to reach that next level as an employee, being productive and things like that.
Mm.
And also, if you refer back to a few episodes back, you had the rise of a chief wellness officer,
Hmm.
and that was an excellent podcast that I would recommend that if your listeners haven't already listened to it. It goes right back to safety. That health and wellness is a component of safety. It's protecting the employee's longevity and quality of life in the future of their business. And also, when you have frequent lost time or restrictions that you have to work around, you have to have an additional employee to fill that role. You have to work with case management with that employee and many other aspects that safety impacts around HR.
Yeah, those are really good points. All right, Brad, I'm going to have to take a quick sponsorship break right now. But when we get back, I want to talk about what it means for a company to embrace full inclusion. Stay with us.
In today's labor market, it is becoming more difficult to attract and retain top talent. The skills gap is widening, which means that businesses are struggling to find qualified workers. Leaders need training programs that will help them improve their leadership skills so they can be better equipped to manage change, engage employees, and lead their companies into the future. IRI Consultants Lead Academy offers leadership development courses for managers and executives in a variety of formats, including live classroom sessions, virtual classrooms, and on-demand e-learning modules. Learn how you can enhance your team's leadership capabilities with Lead Academy courses today. To learn more, visit bit.ly/leadercourses. That's bit.ly/leadercourses.
I'm back now with Brad Kramer, owner and principal consultant for Provenio Consulting. So, Brad, for a lot of our listeners, the first thing they think of when they think of workplace safety is workers' comp. Can you walk us through a typical workers' comp case and HR's responsibility in those cases?
Absolutely. So, the first thing you want to have is some kind of plan. What happens when somebody gets injured? In different states, they have different requirements. If you can refer them to the doctor of your choice, in some cases, you have to allow them to go to whoever they choose. So it's going to vary by state what is in that plan. But what's the initial treatment? Are you going to try to guide them towards the ER or an occupational medicine provider? That should definitely be in your plan. Communicate with the provider, the worker, the setting, the expectations, everything like that. So, what do you have in your facility? What's that relationship look like with that occupational medicine provider? You want to be able to work with the provider on restrictions and talking about what the employee can and can't do. So, making sure that you have that good line of communication that includes the employee,
Hmm.
includes their healthcare provider, includes their supervisor and other members of management, depending on what their role in the business is. And so that can all come right on the heels of filing that first report of injury, which in many businesses HR is responsible for, and also leaning on that work comp provider in case you have an employee that you feel like they're maybe defrauding the system, they're trying to pass off a personal injury as a work related injury.
Hmm.
As the employer, you don't want to be the one making accusations to an employee or having those uncomfortable conversations. So, including in your plan that mechanism of when you're going to include the workers' compensation provider can be a very valuable tool. Also, keeping up on the OSHA 300 record keeping. What is a recordable? Making sure that's posted by February 1st of every year. And if it is applicable to your industry, making sure you report those numbers to OSHA. The return to work process. So, as the employees coming back to work and they have restrictions, they may have follow up appointments, making sure that there's a clear line of communication so everybody in that process understands those expectations. Because our first goal is getting that employee so that they're recovered fully, that they don't have limited motion in those joints or whatever got injured, and we're not impacting their quality of life in the future. And finally, as we close out that injury with the employee, making sure that we have all the documentation from the doctor, the supervisors, the restrictions are all passed, and things like that, and making sure that that employee feels like they've fully recovered, that there's not a missing piece. So that can all be involved in that case management plan that can really go a long ways towards speeding up recovery and making sure employees have a satisfactory recovery.
Hmm. Let's talk about mod factor. The cost of workers' comp is based on something called the experience modification factor, or just mod factor. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. So when your business, just like your auto insurance, you pay premiums based on what your losses were. So what workers' compensation does is they look at what has been your losses compared to a comparable business in your industry, uh, and then they give you a factor. It might be 1.0 means your average for other employers and in your industry. If you're at 1.5, that means you have a 50% higher losses in the last 3 years. If you're at 0.75, you're at 75% of the expected losses. So that increases how much you pay if you're more than that 1.0. So you're going to be paying more the more injuries you have.
Hmm. So, what's the biggest mistake you see HR teams making in the aftermath of any kind of safety incident?
I would say first and foremost is not enough communication with other departments. The HR professional might be focused on the paperwork, following up on appointments and things like that. You might have the safety professional that's focused on the restrictions, and you might have a supervisor that doesn't get fully engaged in what are the restrictions, what can they do, and what cannot be done by their through their restrictions and things like that. So, making sure you have good communication across all parties. The focus is often on their administrative role and not on the actual incident. So you want to look at that incident and make sure you're following up on everything and close it out. So, for example, if the incident investigation just comes back to blaming it on the employee, I don't think we often have the right root cause. So if somebody, let's say they fall, right? Unless they didn't tie their shoe or something like that was pretty obvious, we want to make sure we're looking at, okay, what was there a slippery surface? Was there a trip hazard? Why did they fall? Not just blaming it on the employees. We want to make sure we're getting to the source of the injury so that we can eliminate it. So, one of the big mistakes HR teams make is focusing on the administrative, but not eliminating the hazard that led to it.
So, what processes should be engaged within the company in the aftermath of an accident to prevent this accident from ever happening again?
Well, for one thing, making the priorities about the worker care if there's a big incident. So, the first thing you want to be doing is making sure that employee's okay. If we're talking a big life threatening injury, that takes priority over all the paperwork and reporting and things like that. But you want to make sure there's also a prompt investigation following. So, you can include the proper documentation, getting pictures and witness statements and things like that, whatever would be relevant to that investigation. Is it a reportable for an OSHA injury? So if you have an amputation or hospitalization, loss of an eye, those all have to be reported to OSHA within 8 to 24 hours, depending on the type of injury. Making sure the root cause investigation again is complete. And not only that we find that root cause, but we implement and follow through on those corrective actions because many times we'll define a corrective action and say this is what should be done to eliminate in the future, but that never gets done when we follow up on it. Be aware of the possible litigation or complaints that could come from that injury. And sometimes they may be founded and sometimes they may not be founded. But we want to make sure that we're looking at this as professionals, that we have the documentation there, that we're not going off on tangents or making speculations and things like that. And always remember that the people element. This isn't just workers' compensation, insurance, OSHA recordable numbers. These are our team members, our people in our business that we want to care about. And HR does a very good job of remembering that many cases and reminding the business of that. So making sure they're in that role, supporting their people.
And so, what's the role of internal communication after an accident like this has occurred?
Well, for one thing, should communication be written? Keeping in mind that if you have a severe injury, it could be leading towards litigation and things like that. So making sure we have an idea of what do we want in writing and what should probably be taking place in say a boardroom or a conference room over discussions rather than in written communication. Make sure we're attaining those facts and avoid assumptions and potentially blaming injuries on the employee or something like that where we're jumping to conclusions rather than looking at the root cause. Follow procedures as much as reasonable. There's going to be times that we might have to deviate from procedures based on the circumstances, but we want to make sure we're following those procedures that are in place. Be aware of who should know about the injury and the circumstances because there can be HIPAA concerns, there can be other privacy concerns for that employee. We need to balance that with the supervisor's need to know, such as restrictions of what that employee can and can't do. And then set the median or other needs for root cause analysis or corrective actions. So that might be implementing work orders, policy revisions, and training and other action items that we want to make sure that we're following up on so that if there is litigation, we can prove that we went back and corrected the things rather than just still have them hanging out there, potentially causing another injury.
All right, Brad, it's time for another quick break. We'll be right back after this. You're listening to the Project HR podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Orqua, and my guest today is Brad Kramer, owner and principal consultant for Provenio Consulting. We're back, and clearly to protect the health of employees, we should be looking at preventive rather than reactive measures when it comes to safety. So what do you see as the must-haves of any manufacturing facility safety plan?
You need to have the record keeping, the hazard communication program that focus on the chemical hazards and hazmat. You probably need a working from heights program if you have anybody working, say, from the roof of the building or in mezzanines or anywhere from heights. An emergency response program, PPE training, and making sure we have the right PPE to begin with. And there are several other key programs around those hazards in a business. A big challenge I see with businesses is respiratory protection. Many times, a misunderstanding of when they have to wear respiratory protection, what has to be in place before they just give employees a respirator, because you have to train them, you have to do medical evaluations and things like that. So it's not just giving them PPE and expecting them to know how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have accountability from the top down in the business that gives the resources to the safety program to make sure that we can do the things to keep employees safe and stay within regulations. Many times, a safety committee is going to be not only a vital part of the business, but required by OSHA. So you want to make sure you have a robust safety committee where they're actually having items that they can follow up on and have a voice at the table. Making sure that you're also protecting the health and well-being of the employee. Safety isn't just about making sure they don't have an amputation or lose an eye. It's also about, are we exposing them to carcinogens? Are we giving them the proper protection for chemicals that they're using and other hazards that can come back and impact them years down the road, not just right now?
So sometimes, and I know this is true in manufacturing, is safety is overseen by a safety professional outside of the HR department. So do you have any advice for how HR can leverage their relationship with the safety professionals outside of their department?
Absolutely. Asking questions, making sure you're sitting down at the table and saying, what's involved in your role? How does my role impact you, and vice versa? Because many times those discussions simply don't happen in a manufacturing or other business environment. We all get what we believe is our job and we work towards that goal and don't always figure out how our jobs or how our roles impact the others. Get out on the plant floor and look at the hazards and learn about the hazards that the employees are facing out there or the challenges the supervisors are facing. EHS, or the Environmental Health and Safety function, is often the strongest liaison between management, the workers, and operations. I recommend that any HR professional attend an OSHA 30 hour and any other company trainings that involve safety, even if that HR manager or HR professional isn't going to be out on the plant floor doing that job. Knowing what your employees do and understanding the hazards from that perspective can be very valuable. So don't skip out on those trainings just because they don't directly apply to you. Collaborate. Employee recruitment, marketing campaigns, new hire orientation, incident investigations, those should all have both HR and safety at the table working together, fulfilling those common goals, because many safety functions go right back to employee recruitment and retention and vice versa. So help them see from your perspective what your needs are as an HR professional and really look at what their needs are as well, how you can contribute to them to build a stronger business.
And on the flip side of that, any advice for HR professionals who are managing safety themselves?
Don't skimp on training for yourself or a qualified consultant. What you don't know can kill someone or bankrupt that business. So if you don't understand the hazards that are out on the plant floor and you're trying to write policies and procedures around that, it's not going to work out very well. So understanding those hazards and the proper way to do things is absolutely vital. Quality safety professionals aren't cheap. An inexpensive safety service will often do little to protect your business and employees. They might give you cookie cutter programs that just check a box, but they don't really apply to the hazards and conditions you have. As a trainer, I can train workers to be safe no matter what their policies say, but I can't make an untrained worker safe by giving them the best safety policies. Constantly improve the training, the fall protection, and things like that is very important. Engage the workers, make the connection between safety and the operations and success of the business rather than safety as a regulatory requirement. It's much deeper than just regulations. And absolutely lean on your vendors. They can help you with inspections, providing PPE samples, getting you admission to free seminars and trainings and things like that. So your vendors can really provide a lot for you if you know how to work with them. And never assume new workers have any idea about hazards. Assume that they come from a background where they may have never seen any of the hazards that they're going to be exposed to in your business.
So, in your company, Provenio Consulting gives customers access to safety trainers and consultants. Can you share a little bit more about what you guys do there?
I would love to. We enable companies to protect their most valuable asset, their employees, through training, finding custom solutions, helping them make good business decisions, and being efficient. Safety training such as OSHA 10 and 30 hours. We can include leadership components to those trainings. We do a lot of, say, HAZWOPER, which is hazardous waste operations and emergency response. So if you have chemicals like anhydrous ammonia or lots of hazard or toxic chemicals, we train around that. We can do train the trainer. So training your own managers and trainers to understand what they're training and be effective trainers. So you don't have to bring in a trainer like myself for every class. We can develop policies and procedures such as emergency response plans, lockout and tagout procedures, confined space procedures, pretty much any safety program we need. And compliance risk, we can look at where you're at as far as regulatory compliance, getting you set up on a calendar and things like that. So you always know where you're at with your safety program and have the right tools.
So, Brad, if we want to find out more about you or about your company, Provenio, where can we go?
Our website is www.provenioconsulting.com, and that's Provenio is spelled Provenio, like proven IO, consulting.com. We're also on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. My email is Brad, BRAD, again, provenioconsulting.com. You can reach me by phone, 507-369-6050. And I'll also include a couple links for, we have 2 services that we offer that would be particularly relevant. One of them is a safety snapshot, gives you a good idea of where you're at with your compliance and the business functions of your safety program, as well as how safety and HR guidance on how you two can align, how your departments can align.
So that information and those links will be included in this week's episode companion guide, which you can grab for free at iriconsultants.com/podcast. Right now, though, Brad, it is time for our lightning round questions, and these are questions I ask of every guest of the podcast. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
All right, so our first question is always a topic showdown. In this episode, we've been talking about the intersection of manufacturing, safety, and HR. So in your opinion, which of these fictional workplaces is the most hazardous, the Death Star from Star Wars or Jurassic Park?
I would say the Death Star. There are so many unguarded pits, machines, and intergalactic warfare going on.
Yep, for sure. They needed some workers' comp in that scene. All right, next question. What is the best book you've read recently?
I would say one of 2 by Simon Sinek. Either It Starts With Why or The Infinite Game. Both very good books.
Yeah, agree. I love It Starts With Why. All right, next question. What is your favorite thing about the work that you do?
I think it'd be sharing my love of learning in a way that empowers people to learn about their job, to protect themselves.
Very nice. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
You learn to do hard things by doing hard things. So taking on challenges as a manager, taking on larger projects and things like that, constantly growing and trying to be more valuable.
Very nice. All right, final question. Who or what inspires you?
I think the ideas of what my business can offer the world.
I like that. All right, Brad, thank you so much for joining me today on this week's episode of Project HR.
Thank you very much for having me. I've enjoyed it.
I also want to thank everyone listening in. Here's your final reminder to unlock your access to this episode's companion guide at iriconsultants.com/podcast. If you're ready for your Project HR debut, our team is always looking for outstanding guests. Let us know about your expertise by emailing us at projecthr@iriconsultants.com. Of course, don't forget to subscribe to Project HR. A new episode posts every other Thursday. Finally, drop me a line, leave us a review, or give the show a handful of stars wherever you get your content. That's all for this episode of Project HR. Let's make it a great day at work.